Of all the ways to die in space, I never thought mine would involve a naked blue woman and a gang of piss-off lizard men. Jake ducked as a plasma bolt sizzled past his ear, blowing a chunk out of the alley wall. The alien woman in his arms clung to him, completely nude except for the intricate gold chains draped across her body. He wasn't sure if this was some high society fashion or if he'd just crashed a nudist getaway. Either way, she looked way too calm for someone being actively hunted. "Do you mind telling me why they're trying to kill you?" he asked, dragging her behind a rusted cargo crate. "They are not trying to kill me," she corrected, her voice smooth and unbothered. "They are trying to retrieve me before I am claimed." "Claimed?" Jake peeked around the crate. The lizard men were getting closer, their slit-pupiled eyes scanning the area. He had about 30 seconds before they found his stupid ass. "Yes. You intervened. You are now my claimant. Lady, I have no idea what the hell that means. You will soon." Jake didn't like the way she said that. He also didn't like how she pressed her forehead against his crotch, sighing as if she'd just completed some sacred ritual. "Okay, what the fuck was that?" he stumbled back. "I'm into weird shit, but at least buy me dinner first." The alien woman blinked, confused. "You saved me. You accepted my bond. You are now my consort." "What?" Before he could yell at her about not springing alien marriage proposals mid-gunfight, the lizard men spotted them. Jake grabbed her wrist and ran, dragging his accidental bride through the filthiest part of the spaceport. The moment they turned a corner, more figures blocked their escape. Tall, armored warriors, draped in regal purple cloaks. "Shit, we're cornered," Jake muttered, raising his gun. The woman touched his wrist gently, pushing the weapon down. "No! These are my guards!" One of the towering figures stepped forward, dropping to a knee before her. "Your Majesty, we have secured your consort." Jake choked. "Her what?" Before anyone could explain, someone shoved a cloth over his face, and the world went black. Jake woke up to the softest bed he'd ever touched. A ceiling of gold and white shimmered above him, and silk sheets covered his body. For one beautiful moment, he thought he'd been abducted by a rich, lonely cougar looking for a house pet. Then he heard the giggling. He turned his head. For alien women in sheer robes sat at the edge of the bed, staring at him. They whispered among themselves, their glowing eyes flicking over his body like he was a specimen in a very inappropriate science experiment. Jake sat up, groaning. "I swear to God, if this is some kind of intergalactic sex cult." A familiar voice interrupted him. "You are awake." Jake looked up. Her. She was no longer naked, but her outfit wasn't exactly modest. Deep blue silk hugged her body, embroidered with gold, the slit running high enough that he had to force himself to maintain eye contact. A crown rested on her brow, delicate but unmistakable. "Okay, explain," Jake said, rubbing his temple. "Because I have a lot of questions, starting with why I was kidnapped and why these ladies are looking at me like I'm the main course at an orgy buffet." Livara smiled. "You are my consort now. My people have waited long for my mate to be chosen." "By who?" "By fate." "By you?" Jake stared at her. She had to be fucking with him. "Look, lady, Livara, whatever, I don't know how things work on your planet, but where I come from, saving someone doesn't mean I automatically become their royal sex toy." "It does here." Jake threw his hands up. "Of course it does." The women around the bed giggled again. One of them, a petite green-skinned beauty, tilted her head. "You are fascinating," she mused. "Tell me, are all human males this spirited? You mean confused and horrified? Yeah, most of us would be if we woke up in an alien palace being told we accidentally married a queen." "Not married," Livara corrected, stepping closer. "Not yet. But you are my consort. And to rule I need you. Jake narrowed his eyes. Why? Livara's amused expression faded slightly. Because my people will not accept a queen without a strong mate. It is our way. And my enemies will take advantage of that. Jake considered this. It sounded like a royal political mess he had no interest in being part of. Why me? He asked. I'm nobody. Just a guy who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Livara's lips curled. No, you are something far rarer than that. You are human. Jake blinked. Is that supposed to mean something? You are unpredictable. You act without hesitation. You saved me without knowing who I was, without thinking of gain. And now that I have you. She stepped even closer, her scent warm and distracting, like something between jasmine and danger. I do not intend to let you go. Jake swallowed. Fuck. The door swung open. A tall, four-armed alien with a very large sword stomped in. Your Majesty, we must begin preparations. The people demand to see your consort's strength. Jake's stomach dropped. Hold up. What do you mean, see my strength? Livara gave him a suspiciously smug smile. To be accepted as my mate, you must prove yourself worthy. Jake sighed. Of course I do. And do not worry, she added. It will only be a series of simple trials. The four-armed alien grinned maliciously. Yes, simple trials. If he survives, he will make an excellent king. Jake paled. If? Livara patted his cheek. Try not to die, consort. It would be inconvenient. Jake groaned. He was so screwed. Jake stood in the center of the arena, half-dressed, confused, and very aware that thousands of aliens were watching him like a prime cut of meat. He didn't know what was worse, the roaring crowd, the fact that the air smelled faintly of something that reminded him of grilled pork, or the giant, horned alien glaring at him like he'd personally insulted his mother. Okay, Jake muttered under his breath, shifting uncomfortably. Can someone tell me why I'm standing in a goddamn alien thunderdome? Livara, seated on an ornate throne above him, smiled far too pleasantly. The people must see you demonstrate strength, skill, and endurance. Endurance? Jake shot her a look. Endurance for what? The horned alien slammed his fists together, muscles flexing in ways that made Jake deeply uncomfortable. Oh, hell no. A gong sounded. Before Jake could protest further, the brute lunged. Jake barely dodged, rolling across the sandy floor as a fist the size of a Thanksgiving turkey slammed into the ground where his head had been. Are you serious right now? Jake scrambled up. I don't even know what the rules are. Survive, Livara called down cheerfully. And try not to disappoint me. Jake dodged another blow, sweat slicking his back. He wasn't a fighter, at least, not one who went up against 8-foot-tall murder machines in front of an audience. But he was human. And humans? They cheated. He waited for the brute to charge again, then at the last second, ducked and punched him square in the nuts. The crowd gasped. The brute collapsed with a strangled wheeze. Silence. Then, uproarious laughter. Jake panted, hands on his knees. That counts, right? Livara clapped, smiling like she'd just seen a particularly amusing street performance. Unexpected, but effective. Yeah, that's me. Mr. Unexpected. The brute groaned from the ground. Jake patted his shoulder. Sorry, big guy. Hope you weren't planning on kids. The crowd cheered. The next trial wasn't much better. Jake stood on a platform, while a group of elderly aliens in robes studied him like a prize stud at an auction. One of them, a wrinkled, purple-skinned woman, tapped her chin. Turn around, human. Jake frowned. Excuse me? Turn around. We must assess your form. Livara smirked. They must ensure you are worthy of my lineage. Your lineage? or just checking out my ass?" The old woman grinned. "Both." Jake groaned but turned. More murmurs. More note-taking. "Firm," one elder commented. "Decent proportions," another added. Jake rubbed his temples. "This is the most humiliating experience of my life." "Do not worry," Lavara said. "It is nearly over. Thank God. And now," she continued, "the final trial, a demonstration of stamina." Jake stilled. "Come again?" Lavara rose from her throne, descending the steps with a grace that made Jake's stomach do stupid things. She stopped in front of him, placing a hand on his chest. "You must prove your ability to satisfy your queen." Jake's brain stopped working. The crowd waited. Jake felt every eye on him. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "You mean—" He cleared his throat. "You mean right now? Here? In front of everyone?" Lavara tilted her head. "Do humans not perform before witnesses?" Jake let out a strangled noise. "No." The elders conferred among themselves. "Fascinating," one muttered. Jake turned to Lavara, lowering his voice. "Look, I'm all for some wild experiences, but this? Public performances aren't really my thing." Lavara considered this. "A compromise, then. Please let it be a good one. You must best me in a game of skill." Jake exhaled. "Fine. Fine. That I can do." A servant stepped forward, placing a tall, narrow glass on a table. Inside was a shimmering, thick liquid. Lavara smirked. "A traditional contest. Whoever drinks first and lasts longest wins." Jake stared at the glass. "Lasts longest at what?" "You will see." Jake pinched the bridge of his nose. "I hate this planet." The gong sounded again. He grabbed the glass and downed it in one go. For a second, nothing happened. Then, heat spread through his body. His skin tingled. His blood felt like lava. Lavara's smirk widened. Jake's stomach dropped. "What was that?" "A potent aphrodisiac," she said sweetly. "Now we see how long you last before you beg." Jake broke into a cold sweat. The elders leaned forward in anticipation. The crowd waited in excitement. Jake realized two things. 1, he was very, very screwed. 2, he was definitely not making it out of this planet with his dignity intact. Jake gripped the edges of the ornate chair he'd been forced into, his entire body burning like a furnace. The elders whispered amongst themselves, watching him like a particularly fascinating science experiment. Lavara, ever the picture of smug amusement, sat across from him, lounging in her own throne like a woman who had already won. The effects of the drink pulsed through him, hot and demanding. His heart pounded. His breath came short. He gritted his teeth, refusing to give in. "Struggling human?" Lavara purred, her voice a velvet caress. Jake exhaled slowly through his nose. "I'm fine. Are you?" She leaned forward, just enough for the low-cut fabric of her gown to remind him of all the things he couldn't think about right now. He focused on the elders. "So what's the actual win condition here? Because if it's sit here and try not to make an ass of myself while my entire body is on fire, I think I deserve a medal." The oldest elder, a hunched alien with a beard made of silver tendrils, cleared his throat. "The trial ends when one of you yields to your desires first." Jake let out a strained laugh. "Great. Fantastic. So it's basically a waiting game?" Lavara propped her chin on her hand. "You could make it easier by surrendering now." "Not happening." "Are you certain? You seem uncomfortable." Jake rolled his shoulders, desperately trying to ignore the way his skin prickled with hypersensitivity. "I've been through worse." Lavara raised a brow. "Have you?" Before he could answer, she shifted in her seat, crossing her legs in a way that was absolutely unfair. Jake clenched his jaw. He was not losing to an alien woman in a game of self-control. Minutes passed. Then more. The audience, initially excited, had settled into eager tension. Jake focused on every trick he knew to stay calm. Baseball statistics. The Pythagorean theorem. That one time he'd eaten a gas station burrito and regretted it for 48 hours. But Lavara was not making it easy. She ran a slow, lazy finger along the rim of her goblet, watching him with a knowing smirk. "You're stubborn," she mused. "Yup. And prideful." "Absolutely." Her gaze darkened, something wicked flickering behind her golden irises. "Then allow me to make things more interesting." Jake's gut screamed danger. Lavara stood, slow, deliberate, a predator enjoying the chase. Every step she took sent the crowd into hushed murmurs. She stopped just short of him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her. Jake swallowed. "You're trying to cheat." "Am I?" She dragged a single, deliberate finger down his chest. His breath hitched against his will. He forced his eyes shut. "This is entrapment. This is strategy." The elders leaned forward, clearly entertained. Jake fought for control. He was a man of willpower. A man who... Lavara leaned in. Her breath ghosted over his ear. "Submit," she whispered. Jake nearly lost it. His entire body screamed for relief, for surrender, for just a second of release from this torment. But no. He was not going down like this. He turned the tables. With a sudden shift, he grabbed her wrist, flipping their positions before she could react. Now she was the one pinned against the chair, caught between him and the throne. The crowd gasped. Jake leaned in, mirroring her earlier move, his lips barely an inch from her ear. "Your move, Your Majesty." For the first time, Lavara's smug composure cracked. Her pupils dilated. Her breathing hitched. The tension between them crackled like a live wire. For a moment, Jake thought she might actually give in. Then she grinned. And in a single swift motion, she flipped him back into the chair and straddled his lap. Jake's brain short-circuited. The crowd roared in approval. "You play dirty," he muttered. "I play to win." She cupped his face, her grip firm, commanding. "So human, will you yield?" Jake narrowed his eyes. Then, with every ounce of stubborn defiance he had left, he leaned back and smirked. "Not a chance." The elders burst into laughter. The gong sounded, signaling the end of the trial. Lavara didn't move, still holding his face, her gaze searching his. Then, to his surprise, she laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "You are impossible. And yet you seem impressed," she hummed. "Perhaps." Jake exhaled, his entire body still on fire. "So what now?" Lavara stood, graceful and regal once more. She turned to the elders. "You have seen his strength, his cunning, and his willpower. Is he worthy?" The eldest elder stroked his beard, then nodded. "The human is acceptable." Jake let out a breath of relief. "Glad to hear it." Lavara turned back to him, eyes glinting. "Then it is settled." "Settled?" She smiled. "You are now my consort." Jake froze. "Wait. What?" Jake sat on the edge of an opulent bed, his brain still catching up to the absolute chaos of the last few hours. He had fought an alien brute. Won. Endured public examination like a prize-winning stud. Survived. Outlasted an aphrodisiac-fueled endurance contest against an infuriatingly beautiful alien queen. Barely. And now? Now he was Lavara's consort. "How the hell did this happen?" he muttered, rubbing his temples. The door to the chamber slid open. He looked up just in time to see Lavara entering, draped in something dangerously sheer, her golden eyes filled with amusement. You look troubled, human. Jake exhaled. I don't know if troubled is the right word. She stalked toward him, stopping close enough that he could smell her, something warm, exotic, and entirely too inviting. You are dissatisfied? He barked a laugh. Oh, I wouldn't say that. I mean, if someone told me a month ago I'd be stuck on an alien planet, engaged to a queen, and expected to, he waved vaguely between them, fulfill royal duties, I'd have thought they were insane. And now? He looked up at her, taking in the amused glint in her eyes. Still feels insane. Lavara reached out, trailing a single finger down his chest. You handled yourself well today. Jake swallowed hard. I aim to please. Good, she murmured. Because pleasing me is now your primary responsibility. His stomach tightened. No pressure, huh? She tilted her head. You do not wish to share my bed? Jake hesitated. Not because he didn't want to, God, he wanted to, but because there was something else gnawing at him. He exhaled. Look, I'll be honest. This whole situation, it's a lot. Lavara's expression didn't change. Are you afraid? Jake laughed, running a hand through his hair. Oh, absolutely. I've been thrown into a completely different culture, been made a consort without a choice, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I screw this up, there's probably some kind of execution involved, right? She smirked. Not execution. Perhaps exile. Or being sent to the labor camps in the outer moons. A fate worse than death, I am told. Fantastic, Jake muttered. So yeah. Just trying to wrap my head around all of this. Lavara studied him for a long moment before her expression softened, just slightly. You are not entirely without choice, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Oh, she nodded. If you truly do not wish this, I will grant you freedom. You may leave. I will arrange transport back to your world. Jake blinked. Seriously? Yes. A long silence stretched between them. Jake searched her face, trying to find any sign of deception, but all he saw was honesty. He let out a slow breath. You're really giving me an out? She nodded once. Jake stared at the ground for a moment, his mind racing. He could go home. Back to normal. Back to what? A crappy apartment? A dull job? Back to not being the consort of a ridiculously beautiful, dangerously alluring alien queen. He looked up at her again. What happens if I stay? Lavara's lips curved. Then you fulfill your role. And that involves... She leaned in, her voice a low purr. Many things. Jake exhaled sharply. You're really not making this decision easier. That is my intention. He chuckled, shaking his head. You're something else, you know that? She tilted his chin up, forcing him to meet her gaze. And you, human, are the most entertaining thing to happen to my court in years. Jake felt his stomach flip. There it was again. That pull. That undeniable electricity between them. He had no idea what the future held. No clue if he was making the right decision. But when Lavara leaned in, closing the distance between them, Jake made his choice. He stayed,